So, our congregation Bible study for this week, we end in chapter 13 with the last subheading. What did this vision mean for the Israelites, them that were in Babylon? So that the team will come and learn and see the different lessons will benefit from in this part of the vision. Our reader is Brother Benaiah Ukwe. So that please give him attention as he read paragraph 15 for us.
In order to find the Bible's answer to that question, let us consider a series of related questions that will help us to see a full and complete picture. First, what was the overall prophetic message of the vision? Simply put, the overall message was that pure worship would be restored. This was surely clear to Ezekiel. He had already written what is now chapter 8 of Ezekiel, in which Jehovah graphically illustrated the deplorable condition of the temple in Jerusalem. And Ezekiel must have been delighted to write in detail about a stunning contrast as now found in chapters 40 to 48. Here we see not pure worship corrupted, but pure worship as it should have been, a glorious ideal of worshiping Jehovah according to the Mosaic law.
Paragraph 15, question A. What was the main message of Ezekiel's vision? Sister Kondono?
Pure worship.
Very good. Thank you. Question B. What is the difference between Ezekiel chapter 8 and Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48? Brother Bia.
In Ezekiel chapter 8, it focused on the barbarous thing that the Israelites was doing and what Jehovah was going to do about it. But now, the Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48 is discussing about how Jehovah will make sure that pure worship is restored.
That's very good. Thank you plenty, Brother Bia. So let's learn more from this vision as we consider paragraph 16.
To restore the worship of Jehovah to its rightful state, it will have to be elevated. Over a century earlier, the prophet Isaiah was inspired to write, "In the final part of the days, the mountain of the house of Jehovah will become firmly established above the top of the mountains, and it will be raised up above the hills." Isaiah clearly foresaw that Jehovah's pure worship will be restored and elevated, as if placed on the loftiest of mountains. And now, where did Ezekiel find himself in this divine vision? He was on a very high mountain, looking at the house of Jehovah. Ezekiel's vision thus confirmed that pure worship would be restored.
How the temple vision Ezekiel saw show that the thing Isaiah talked about. How the temple vision Ezekiel saw show that the thing Isaiah talked about more than 100 years back was true. Sister Neil?
In Isaiah chapter 2, verse 2, there, Isaiah said that the mountain of the house of Jehovah was going to be firmly established on the top of the mountain, and on the top of the hills. And there in Ezekiel 40, verse 2, Ezekiel was there observing or being carried on a tour by an angel of Jehovah's temple that was situated on a very high mountain.
Thank you plenty, yes. Sister Thompson?
So in Isaiah's vision, or what Isaiah saw, it was showing that one day Jehovah was going to restore pure worship and was going to be high, very high. And that was confirmed by Ezekiel's prophecy that pure worship would be restored.
That's true. Thank you too for that point. Now let's see the picture right there, in line with the paragraph. What we see in that picture? Brother Bangula?
Well, we can see that the temple is situated down, and we can know that it was on top of a mountain that Ezekiel was looking down to see Jehovah's temple.
Yes. Thank you plenty. Good. So let's move ahead and learn other things. For example, in Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48, what are the different things it talk about regarding this temple vision that he saw? Let's see paragraph 17, please.
Consider a brief overview of what Ezekiel saw and heard as recorded in Ezekiel chapters 40 to 48. He watched as the angel measured the gates, the wall, the courtyards, and the sanctuary of the temple. Then came a thrilling event, Jehovah's glorious arrival at the temple. Jehovah gave counsel to his wayward people, to the priests, and to the chieftains. Ezekiel saw a river flowing from the sanctuary, bringing life and blessings as it emptied into the Dead Sea. And he saw the land itself divided into precise parcels, with pure worship taking its place near the center of the land. What was the overall impression? Clearly, Jehovah was reassuring his people that pure worship will be restored and exalted. He will bless his house of worship with his presence, and he will cause blessings to flow from that temple, bringing healing, life, and order to the restored land.
So let's see whether we can talk about these things in order to help all of us understand them well. So the question says, explain some of the things in Ezekiel chapter 40 to 48. Let's start with Sister Nebler.
There it says he watched the angel measuring the gates, the wall, the courtyard, the sanctuary of the temple.
Thank you. And which part of Ezekiel? Which part of which chapter in Ezekiel? Cover that one. Brother Bian?
Ezekiel chapter 40 to 42.
Thank you. Good. What next in the vision? Sister Thompson?
Ezekiel 43, 44, and 45, 43, 1 to 12, 44, 10 to 31, and 45, 9 to 12 talk about the time Jehovah arrived at the temple, that glorious, wonderful arrival, and there he gave counsel to those who were being disobedient, who were not listening to Jehovah. He gave counsel to them, he gave counsel to the priest and to the chieftain.
Thank you plenty. Good. So that the other part of that vision. Brother Bankula?
47, 1 to 12, talk about a river that flows from the sanctuary and bringing blessing to the empty Dead Sea.
Very good. Thank you. Let me go back to the picture we were looking at a few minutes ago and talk about that river. How you see that in the picture? Sister Neil?
We see that the river is flowing from the temple, and as it flows down, all the trees that are around it are so fresh. And the fact that it says it is going into the Dead Sea, where there is no life, as it enters into the Dead Sea, all lives come up. Fish and other living creatures start to live in the Dead Sea.
Very good. Thank you. So we see exactly that river flowing. What else we learn about in this vision? Sister Thompson?
The way Jehovah divided the land, it was equal size. He didn't just divide any kind of way. Every parcel, every piece had equal size. And it was very close to, the temple was in the center, showing that pure worship would be in the middle of the land, or would be a center part of that temple.
Thank you plenty, Sister Thompson. Brother Bankula?
So the vision highlighted that pure worship will be restored and exalted. So it makes Ezekiel to understand with all these different futures that pure worship can be restored and exalted.
Yes, thank you too. Brother Bian?
And it also showed that the same way as the river flow, it was giving life. When pure worship is restored, it will bring life, healing, and restore the land so that people can worship Jehovah the way he wants it to be.
That's very good. Thank you too for your comment. Now let me look at our next picture and talk about it in line with the different things we're just commenting on. about this temple. Our next picture showing there. Brother Bien.
So all the blessing, restoration that we discussed, that what the temple standing for, everything in that one temple. So when Ezekiel saw the temple being restored, Jehovah was promising that the same way the temple will be restored, all those promises about healing, blessing, that what the temple restoration stand for.
Very good. And you see how that temple shining. That was a real encouraging vision for Ezekiel. Brother Kokolo?
And what encouraging was the first time he was carried by the angel, what he saw happening in and around the temple, it was discouraging to him. So this time he's seeing nothing happening around the temple that is discouraging, but encouraging. So at least his heart is laying down a little bit now.
Yes, thank you too for your comment. So let's take paragraph 18 and see 4 important things about this temple that we can also learn from the vision, paragraph 18, please.
Second, was the vision meant to be taken literally? No. Ezekiel and his fellow exiles to whom he described his vision likely saw immediately that it was not meant to be taken literally. Why not? Recall that Ezekiel saw this temple on a very high mountain. While that tied in nicely with Isaiah's prophecy, it did not fit the physical location of the temple. Solomon's temple had been situated on Mount Moriah in Jerusalem, and that was where it would one day be rebuilt. But was that a very high mountain? No. In fact, Mount Moriah is ringed by other summits that are of equal or greater height. Also, the temple complex that Ezekiel saw was huge. With its broad perimeter enclosed by a wall, it was too large to fit on top of Mount Moriah. It would not even have fit within the city limits of Jerusalem of Solomon's day. Then too, the exiles surely did not expect that a literal river would flow from the temple sanctuary and then empty into the Dead Sea, where it will heal those lifeless waters. Finally, the mountainous terrain of the Promised Land did not allow for straight parallel borders between the tribes, as described in the vision. So, the vision did not suggest a literal interpretation.
The temple that was in Jerusalem, that Ezekiel saw in his vision, explain. So if you say yes, explain. If you say no, let's start there with Sister New, please.
We can say no, because the temple in Jerusalem was built on Mount Moriah, but it was not a very high mountain. So we can say that the temple that Ezekiel saw, he said it was on a very high mountain, so it wouldn't have fitted the description that was given about the temple in Jerusalem.
Thank you very much. Yes, that's one fine point there. Sister Thompson?
Also, the different part of the temple was too huge for it to fit. The borders of that temple with the wall and everything was so large, it couldn't fit on top of Mount Moriah.
Yes, good. That's another point there about the vision. Brother Yukwe?
And the Jews who were to later return but were in exile, they never expected that a literal river would flow from the temple sanctuary and then empty into the Dead Sea, and then the Dead Sea becomes alive again. So they could finally see that all of what Ezekiel saw was just a vision, and it was not literal as the temple was going to be built.
That's very true. Yes, thank you too for your point, Brother Yukwe. Brother Bankula?
Since Israel, where the temple was surrounded by mountains, in Ezekiel's vision, they could not see that the division Jehovah made in the vision could be literal to the land in Jerusalem, because there were a lot of mountains. So we can actually say that it was not a real thing that was happening.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you too for your comment. Sister Neil?
And even when Jehovah divided the land among the different tribes, he said the tribes that were larger should get a big portion, and the smaller tribes would get small portion, and they did not have an even boundary. It was all crooked up, so we can say that it was not literal, what Ezekiel saw.
Yeah. So we see all the fine points that convince us that this vision here, it was not about the temple that was in Jerusalem. Now let's see why Jehovah gave that vision to Ezekiel then. What effect it was supposed to have on the Israelites. Let's see paragraphs 19 to 21, please.
Third, what effect was the vision meant to have on Ezekiel's people? When contemplating Jehovah's lofty standards for pure worship, the people who have been moved to shame, Jehovah told Ezekiel to describe the temple to the house of Israel. Ezekiel's description of this temple was to be so thorough that the Israelites could in effect study its plan. Why were the people to ponder over that temple? As we have seen, it was not in order to build it. Rather, it was, as Jehovah said, so that they will feel ashamed because of their errors. Why might this vision touch the consciences of right-hearted people and move them to shame? Note what Ezekiel was told. Son of man, pay attention, watch, and listen carefully to everything that I tell you about the statutes and the laws of the temple of Jehovah. Again and again, Ezekiel heard about statutes and laws. Ezekiel was often reminded too about Jehovah's standards, even the standard for the length of a cubit and the standard for accurate weights. Why? Over 50 times in this one vision, Ezekiel recalls the original language word for measure and measurement. Measurements, weights, laws, statutes. What was Jehovah telling his people? It seems that he was reminding them in powerful language of this vital truth. Jehovah alone sets the standards for pure worship. Those who have departed from those standards needed to feel ashamed. In what ways, though, did the vision teach the Jews such lessons? In the following chapter, we will consider some specific examples. That will help us to see more clearly what this remarkable vision means for us today.
Brother Yukwe, thank you plenty for being here to read these paragraphs for us. Let's please read Ezekiel 43 verses 10 to 12 before we discuss this question. Let's have a reader, please. Sister Kunduno, please read it for us.
As for you, son of man, describe the temple to the house of Israel, so that they will feel ashamed because of their errors, and they should study its plan. If they feel ashamed of all they have done, you should make known to them the grand plan of the temple, its arrangement, its exits, and its entrances. Show them all its grand plans and its statutes, its grand plans and its laws, and write them down before their eyes, so that they may observe all its grand plan and carry out its statutes. This is the law of the temple. The entire territory all around the top of the mountain is most holy. Look, this is the law of the temple.
Thank you plenty, Sister Kunduno. The question, how Jehovah wanted his people to feel when they hear the vision from Ezekiel. So let's please talk about that first part of it. Sister Neblet.
He wanted them to feel ashamed and to change.
Yes, thank you. How we see it from the scripture we're coming from reading? Brother Bia?
In verse 10, it make it very clear. It says, so that they will feel ashamed because of their errors. So when they see the description of the temple, how it meets Jehovah's standard, then they look at their own life and how it not meet Jehovah's standard, it will make them to be ashamed, and it will move them to make adjustment in their life.
Yes, thank you very much. So we also see why it will make them to feel that way. Now let's look at the picture in line with the comment of the Israelites feeling ashamed. Who wants to explain that picture for us after they saw that vision? How it affected them to feel ashamed. Brother Koklo.
So we can see all those studying the plan now, as they see it, they are feeling ashamed because they're holding their heart, their head, and seeing exactly the different and the instruction on how they have stay away from Jehovah. So now the idea that Jehovah wanted to really for them to get is now having a real effect on them, as we see in the picture.
Yes, thank you. So when it comes to other things that Ezekiel talked about in this vision, for example, the statutes and the laws of the temple, what I want to tell us about Jehovah when it comes to how we worship him. Some of those expressions Ezekiel used. Yeah, Brother Bankula?
Jehovah is the only one that have the right to set laws, and he's the only one to tell us how to worship him.
Very true. And when he set those laws and standards, what does he expect? Brother Yukwe?
That we obey them, we live by them. And if we depart from them, from those standards, we should feel ashamed, just as Ezekiel told those Jews to feel ashamed about departing from Jehovah's standards.
Yes. So in a further part of this book, we already see plenty of lessons we can learn when it comes to how Jehovah expects us to live by his standards. Let's please take on the review questions for this box. What do you learn about pure worship? Question 1. What is the easy way we can explain Ezekiel temple vision? Way back we used to explain it hard way, but what is the easy way we can explain it now? Sister Neil?
Yes, like first time they will always give a type and anti-type, but now we're going to study it straight. Just stick to what the Bible says. When there is no other explanation given, no need to go looking for it.
Very true. Yes. Brother Yukwe?
And when we're talking about Ezekiel temple vision, we're talking about Jehovah's standard for pure worship. How Jehovah wants us to worship him.
Yes, thank you. So why we can say that the temple that Ezekiel saw was not the same temple that Paul talked about? Why we say it different? Sister Kunduno.
The temple that Ezekiel saw, many sacrifices was done there, like for the high priest, and they were having different sacrifices. He need to do sacrifice for his own sin and for the people too. So the one that Paul talked is only one sacrifice, and it's for Jesus. So he died for one, and he did the sacrifice not for his own sin, but for other people.
Very true, yes. Those are some of the differences with those two temples. Brother Bien?
Paul also said that the one that he saw, that heaven is a, but in Ezekiel's vision, he not mentioned anything about heaven. Everything that he said, it make it clear that he was talking about something on earth.
Very good. Thank you too for the points. Sister Thompson?
And Ezekiel's vision was described by Ezekiel for the Jews that were exiled in Babylon, while Paul, the spiritual temple he saw, he was addressing the Hebrew Christians.
Yes. Yeah, thank you plenty for all the fine points I explained why we convinced that the vision that Ezekiel saw that not the same temple Paul talked about. The final question, what was the main message in Ezekiel's vision for he and the other Israelites them in Babylon? Sister Neil?
Pure worship will be restored.
Yes, that was very encouraging. Good. Yeah, thank you for preparing good for the congregation Bible study and your fan comment them. So next week, we look forward to studying chapter 14. This is the law of the temple. And watch out for points such as the high mountain. What it means? The lofty gates, those very huge gates that in a vision, and also the measurement of the wall. What all the ones mean? We look forward to